Good evening, and welcome back to Wisdom by the Fireside. In today's live story, we step into the world of a man who had everything: a perfect marriage, a loving family, a high-paying career, and a future most only dream of. But then came the moment life whispered a different test. How much would you sacrifice for the one who once gave you everything? He thought no one was watching, but someone was. From the outside, Daniel's life looked like a promotional brochure for the American dream. It was a late summer morning in 2007 when Daniel stepped onto his porch in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, sipping his black coffee as the sun crept across the lawn. His neighbors often smiled when they saw him, always polished in a tailored suit, always calm, always kind. He worked as a regional manager at Mid-Central Bank, managing assets, people, and strategies with ease. He was the type of leader that junior employees aspired to become, and senior executives trusted implicitly. His home reflected his life: a two-story colonial with freshly painted shutters, an emerald lawn mowed diagonally, and a paved driveway where two luxury sedans rested: his sleek Mercedes-Benz E-Class and his wife's elegant Lexus RX. Amanda, his wife of 11 years, was equally admirable. She taught English literature at a prestigious private school and served on the PTA. Their children, Ella, 8, and Jaden, 6, were cheerful and well-mannered. On weekdays, Amanda dropped them off at Maple Heights Academy, a place of violin lessons, character-building programs, and organic lunches. On Sundays, the family sat together at St. Matthew's Church, always on the third pew to the left. Daniel had his arm wrapped around Amanda, Jaden leaned against his mother's shoulder, and Ella sometimes dozed off during the choir's slower hymns. The pastor often used them as a visual metaphor for family harmony. Daniel didn't take it for granted. He had grown up with less, much less. His mother, Evelyn, had raised him alone after his father's heart attack in 1979. She'd worked double shifts as a seamstress in Peoria, Illinois, barely making ends meet, and never once remarried. She said she didn't want to confuse Daniel's understanding of loyalty. That principle had shaped Daniel's life: loyalty to family, to values, to promises. Evelyn now lived alone in a one-bedroom duplex across the state line. She never asked for anything. They spoke on the phone every Sunday night. It was ritual. He would call her around 7:15 p.m. after putting the kids to bed, and she would ask about their grades, Amanda's baking experiments, and the weather. Daniel always reassured her that life was good. No, great. And it was, until the night she didn't pick up. At first, he wasn't worried. Maybe she was taking a nap, or at the store. He left a message and didn't think much of it. But the next day, no answer. The day after that, still nothing. He tried her neighbor, but they hadn't seen her. A week later, Daniel took a personal day, packed an overnight bag, and drove the 3.5 hours to Peoria. Amanda raised an eyebrow, but didn't question it. "Tell your mum I said hi," she said, her voice casual. Daniel nodded. He didn't know it at the time, but this trip, this single, unplanned trip, would begin the unraveling of the perfect life he'd spent years building. And nothing, would ever be the same again. Daniel arrived in Peoria just after 1 p.m. It was a windy Tuesday, and the leaves that clung to the sidewalks danced like they were trying to tell him something he couldn't yet understand. Evelyn's duplex sat on a quiet corner of Caldwell Street, a familiar sight from his childhood. The same cracked sidewalk, the rusting mailbox she always insisted didn't need replacing, the faded blue shutters he once helped her repaint over a decade ago. Nostalgia mingled with unease as he parked and stepped out of the car. He knocked. No answer. He called her name through the door. Still silence. He felt the tightness in his chest as he pulled out the spare key she had given him years ago, a small copper thing taped inside an envelope with the words, "Just in case, sweetheart," written in her handwriting. The door creaked open, and a strange smell hit him immediately. Not decay or rot, but something off. A sour mix of unwashed dishes, stagnant air, and uneaten food. Mom. The living room was dim, the curtains drawn, mail stacked high on the counter. The television was still on, an old rerun of Murder, She Wrote, humming in the background, but no one was there to watch it. He found her in the bedroom. Evelyn lay on her side, a blanket barely covering her frail frame. Her cheeks were sunken, skin pale, eyes closed. For a second, he thought she was dead. "Mom! Mom!" She stirred. Barely. Her voice cracked like dry leaves. "Danny." He fell to his knees, gently touching her forehead. Burning hot. "What happened? Why didn't you call me? Why didn't anyone?" She tried to lift her hand, but couldn't. "Didn't want to worry you," she whispered. She had collapsed 2 days ago while reaching for the kettle. Couldn't get up, hadn't eaten, barely drank water. Her phone had died in the kitchen, and she hadn't been able to crawl far enough to reach it. Daniel called 911 immediately. The ambulance arrived within minutes. The ER doctor ran tests while Daniel stood outside the curtain, his jaw tight, guilt flooding every vein. The results were worse than expected. Rheumatoid arthritis at an advanced stage, atrial fibrillation, early signs of dementia, and several nutritional deficiencies. "How did she get this bad?" he asked the doctor. "She's been ignoring symptoms for months," the doctor replied. "Possibly years." The medical bill for her first 3 days, even before diagnosis treatments, totaled over $8,700. When they asked about insurance, Daniel's heart sank. Her coverage had lapsed 8 months ago. He called her provider. No luck. "We're unable to re-enroll her at this stage," they said. He tried 4 others. All declined. That night, Daniel didn't drive back to Cedar Rapids. He slept in a hospital chair beside his mother's bed. He held her hand while she murmured stories from decades ago, half of them jumbled by fever or dementia. She kept calling him Benny, his father's name. He didn't correct her. He just wept silently. The next morning, he called his assistant at the bank and said he needed the rest of the week off. Family emergency. She said she understood. He lied to Amanda, said he had an unexpected conference and would be back Friday. She sounded distracted, maybe with the kids. Daniel stared at the ceiling that night, wondering how he'd missed the signs, all those Sunday calls, the "I'm fine, sweetheart" responses. He realized then that she hadn't been okay for a long time, and he hadn't known because he hadn't looked. By Friday, Evelyn was stable, but not well. She was placed in a step-down unit with part-time monitoring, and Daniel had already arranged a home nurse to start visits twice a week once she was discharged. The hospital handed him a stack of prescriptions, care instructions, and, more urgently, a temporary invoice. The total now stood at over $14,000. He pulled out his personal credit card and swiped. No hesitation, no second thought. It wasn't just money, it was his mother. He didn't tell Amanda. Instead, he returned to Cedar Rapids that Sunday evening, kissed his kids goodnight, and promised Amanda they'd go out for brunch next weekend. She smiled, but her eyes didn't. He had missed Ella's school recital. Again. At work the next morning, Daniel was distracted. He kept checking his phone, glancing at Evelyn's nurse's updates and scheduling follow-ups with her new physicians in Peoria. By Thursday, he took another day off, this time without the pretense of a conference. He drove back to his mother's duplex, filled the fridge with fresh food, cleaned the bathrooms, and installed a handrail by her bed. He helped her practice, walking up and down the hallway, each step a slow battle. "I'm sorry to be such a burden," she whispered. He knelt beside her. "You gave up everything for me, Mom. I'm just returning the favor." Still, even with his efforts, Evelyn's condition deteriorated slowly. There were bad days when she couldn't move at all, and better ones when she insisted on making Daniel a grilled cheese, even though her hands trembled too much to hold the spatula. Daniel began spending every other weekend in Peoria, and when that wasn't enough, he started using his vacation days. Amanda noticed. At first, she was supportive. "She's your mum," she said, trying to smile through the worry. "Of course you need to help her." But then he missed Jaden's birthday lunch, then PTA night, then the couple's retreat she had looked forward to all year. Eventually, the discussions turned to arguments. "How long is this going to go on, Daniel?" she asked one night. "As long as she needs me," he replied. "But what about us?" she said. "What about your family?" He stared at her, feeling the words before he said them. "She is my family too." They didn't speak the rest of the night. By the end of that year, his vacation days were gone. Then the sick days. Then came the unpaid leave. Daniel's supervisor at the bank, a man named Terry, called him in. "Daniel, you're one of our best, but I need to be honest. This can't keep going on. You've missed over 20 days this quarter. Head office is watching." Daniel promised to balance things out. He said he'd reduce his time away, but he didn't, because Evelyn's needs kept increasing, and there was no one else. He tried hiring a live-in caregiver, but even the most affordable options cost more than $4,000 per month, and the last nurse stole from his mother's drawer. Daniel fired her on the spot and took over again himself. In March, Mid-Central Bank let him go. Amanda cried when he told her. But it wasn't out of sympathy, it was out of fear. That night, Daniel sold his Mercedes. Then he took out money from their emergency savings. Then he dipped into their college fund. He assured Amanda it was just a bridge, temporary. But in her eyes, something had changed. The bridge was burning behind them. The first sign that Amanda had reached her limit came in silence. Not in yelling or slamming doors, but in the quiet way she moved around the house. No more goodnight kisses. No more, "How was your day?" She would whisper goodbyes to the kids and let Daniel sleep in the guest room when he came home late from Peoria, reeking of hospital antiseptic and exhaustion. He noticed how Jaden started asking when Daddy would stop visiting Grandma so much, and how Ella quietly said one night at dinner, "Mommy cries when she does the bills." Daniel didn't blame them, he blamed himself. But what else could he do? By mid-2009, Daniel was out of savings. He had applied for remote part-time banking jobs, even bookkeeping gigs. But nothing paid enough to support both households. Amanda had returned to teaching full-time to keep things afloat, but resentment had settled in like mold. So he sold the Lexus, the last luxury left. Then, the hardest blow yet, the mortgage. Amanda came into the living room, her face pale, a manila envelope in her hand. Foreclosure notice. Daniel felt the room spin. They were 3 months behind. The bank wouldn't grant another grace period. "I'll fix this," he said. "I just need—" "You need to come home," she interrupted, her voice cracking. "We need you. The kids need you. I need you." Daniel sat down, head in his hands. "I can't leave her, Amanda. She has no one else. She raised me alone, gave up everything. I can't let her die alone." She didn't argue. She just left the room. 2 days later, she filed for divorce. Daniel didn't contest it. He couldn't. When the day came for the court hearing, Amanda wore a navy blue dress and held both children by the hand. Daniel arrived alone, holding a worn envelope with documentation of his mother's medical history and a handwritten letter Evelyn had written to him the week before. He didn't show it to anyone. He didn't speak much in court. Amanda got full custody. He got visitation rights whenever suitable and stable. The judge looked at him, not unkindly, but with resignation. "You're a good man, Mr. Daniels, but the court must act in the children's best interest." He nodded. He didn't argue. Because how could he explain to strangers in robes and ties that he wasn't choosing between his kids and his mother? He was just trying to save the only woman who had never stopped sacrificing for him. That same week, the house was reclaimed by the bank. Amanda moved into a smaller townhouse on the north side with Ella and Jaden. Daniel moved into Evelyn's duplex in Peoria. He packed 2 bags, an old suit, some photo albums, and a few kitchen essentials. He left behind framed degrees, fancy furniture, birthday cards, and half his heart. He wasn't a banker anymore. He wasn't even a husband. He was just a man with trembling hands, trying to feed soup to his mother, who couldn't remember what day it was. At night, he would watch her sleep. He'd think about Ella's piano lessons, Jaden's soccer games, Amanda's laugh during Sunday brunch, and wonder if any of it had been real. Then Evelyn would stir and whisper, "Are you there, sweetheart?" And he would say, "Always." Because he was. Always. The years that followed were not marked by dates on a calendar, but by Evelyn's slow decline. From 2010 through 2015, Daniel's life became small, routine. In a world that once spun with boardroom meetings, quarterly projections, and country club brunches, he now moved quietly between doctor visits, medication refills, and laundry loads. The duplex in Peoria had seen better days. The paint peeled in places, and the water heater rattled sometimes, but it was warm. It was home now. Daniel converted the guest room into a care space for Evelyn. He bought a hospital-grade bed, installed mobility bars, and learned to lift her without straining her back or his knees. He became proficient at insulin injections, fluid monitoring, and bed baths. He memorized her medication schedule down to the hour. And through it all, Evelyn never once stopped thanking him. Even when her mind slipped, when she thought he was her husband Benny, she would still smile and say, "You've always taken such good care of me." The neighborhood noticed. Elderly folks sitting on their porches would wave when Daniel pushed Evelyn in her wheelchair through the streets. Children on bikes called him Mr. Daniel. The mailman left small notes like, "You're doing a good job," on envelopes. But no one offered help. No one knocked and said, "Let me watch her for an hour so you can rest." Still, Daniel didn't expect that. He didn't ask for applause. He just wanted to give his mother dignity in her final years. But the loneliness cut deep. Sometimes at night, he would scroll through his old phone gallery, staring at photos of Ella in her school uniform, of Jaden at the beach, of Amanda smiling in that red dress from their 10th anniversary. He didn't call. He didn't know what to say. He sent birthday cards, always with money tucked inside, and wrote, "Love always, Dad," at the bottom. Amanda never responded. He didn't blame her. He had made a choice, and choices have consequences. His diet deteriorated. He ate frozen meals, canned beans, fast food. He didn't care much. Most days, he ate standing in the kitchen, flipping through the newspaper while Evelyn napped. Sometimes, he'd wrap the food in old classifieds just to save on cleaning plates. He lost weight. His hair thinned. His hands started to tremble. Not from illness, but fatigue. He hadn't slept a full night in years. Evelyn's condition worsened. By 2014, she couldn't stand. By 2015, she barely spoke. Her eyes still found his, still trusted him, still loved him. On a snowy morning in December, she looked at him one last time and whispered, "You're my hero, Danny. I'll tell your father everything." She passed away that night, quietly, peacefully, in his arms. Daniel didn't cry, not immediately. He called the coroner, signed the paperwork, arranged a simple burial beside his father. Only 3 people attended: him, the pastor, and an old woman from 2 doors down, who said she just wanted to pay respect to a woman who raised a good man. When he got home that night, he sat in Evelyn's empty room, listening to the silence. A silence so heavy it felt like it would collapse the walls. He didn't eat for 3 days, didn't leave the house for a week. Time no longer moved, because when the person you gave your whole life for disappears, you begin to wonder if there's any life left for you at all. Winter turned to spring, but the walls of the duplex stayed cold. Evelyn's room remained untouched, the pillows still fluffed, the slippers neatly placed by the bed, her Bible open to a page Daniel couldn't bear to close. He had become a ghost of himself. He stopped shaving, ate only when hunger physically pushed him. The mail piled up, newspapers stacked on the kitchen table, untouched, unread. Every night, he sat in the old recliner, a blanket draped over his legs, staring at the muted television. Static, old game shows, the occasional church program, but nothing truly registered. He barely noticed when the faucet started leaking or when the porch light went out. The house began to fall apart, slowly, just like him. What haunted him most was the echo of Evelyn's last words. "I'll tell your father everything." He kept hearing them, in dreams, in the shuffle of her slippers across the hardwood in his memory, in the quiet moments before sleep when guilt crept in. He thought of calling Amanda, of writing to his kids, but what would he say? "Hi, it's Dad. I'm still here. Still a mess, still trying to figure out who I am now that the only person I had left is gone." Instead, he stayed silent until one muggy afternoon in July, while tossing out Evelyn's old magazines, something caught his eye. A flyer, just a plain folded paper tucked into the mailbox. It read, "Branch manager needed. Apply today. Rivertown Financial, Peoria office." The bank's logo looked familiar. A regional branch of a national name, modest but solid. The office was only 5 blocks away. Daniel almost threw it away. Almost. But something inside him stirred. Not hope. He wasn't foolish enough for that. Curiosity, maybe, or desperation. He stared at himself in the bathroom mirror for the first time in weeks, trimmed his beard, pressed a shirt, pulled his old resume from a USB drive tucked inside a dusty drawer. He changed the date, left out the gaps, and walked into the branch that Friday afternoon. The front desk clerk looked startled, not by his presence, but by the fact that someone with that resume had walked in without an appointment. "We're actually doing interviews today," she said. "Just upstairs. I can see if Mr. Davis is available." Daniel nodded, trying to steady his hands. He was led to a conference room with brown leather chairs and a window that overlooked the street. He had pushed his mother down in a wheelchair so many times. He waited. At exactly 2:04 p.m., a man entered. Late 50s, silver hair, clean suit, clear eyes. He extended a hand and said, "Walter Davis, I'll be retiring soon, looking for someone to take my place." They sat, and for the first time in years, Daniel spoke in his old voice, calm, measured, articulate. They talked banking, strategy, compliance. But halfway through, Walter leaned back in his chair, tapped the side of the resume, and asked, "Tell me about your personal life." Daniel blinked. I'm not sure that's relevant," he replied, unsure. Walter didn't smile. "It is." So Daniel told the truth, or part of it. "I had a good life, perfect maybe, married, 2 kids, big house, but things changed. My mother got sick, very sick, and I ended up losing my job, my marriage, my home. My kids live with their mother now." He looked down. Shame prickled his skin like a cold wind. There was a pause, and then Walter said something that made Daniel's throat tighten. "All that because you gave your ill mother your time?" Daniel looked up, startled. How do you know that?" Walter leaned forward. "I was your neighbor. Lived 2 houses down. Saw you pushing her to the corner store. Saw you carry her back inside when her knees gave out. Watched you shovel her driveway in the middle of the night." Daniel's jaw slackened. "I didn't know." Walter nodded. "You never looked around. You never saw us watching. But we saw you. Every single day." Daniel didn't speak. He just stared at the floor. And when he finally lifted his eyes, they were full of tears. Walter handed Daniel a handkerchief from his breast pocket, the kind old-fashioned men still carried, and said gently, "Take a moment." Daniel wiped his eyes and whispered, "I thought no one noticed. I thought it was all invisible." Walter leaned back, his face unreadable. Then he said, "That's the thing about good men, Daniel. They don't do good to be seen. But sometimes, when the right people do see, it changes everything." Daniel sat there, unsure if this was real or some divine hallucination. The silence between them thickened until Walter broke it. "You're hired." Daniel blinked. I beg your pardon?" "You're hired," Walter repeated. "Effective 2 weeks from Monday." Daniel's breath caught in his chest. "You're serious?" "Completely. I've interviewed 15 candidates. Most of them walked in with ego and spreadsheets. But you..." He paused. "You walked in with humility, with fire. You've already proven you know what sacrifice means. That's the kind of person I want handling people's lives and livelihoods." Daniel couldn't speak. "I've cleared it with regional. Salary package is finalized. Triple what you earned at Mid-Central plus bonuses. Health insurance from day 1. Company vehicle. And the house we offer for our manager's relocation package, it's just 5 minutes from here. Modest, but spacious." Daniel sat in stunned silence. He felt like he was dreaming. After all the years of grief, of loss, of sleeping in a creaking bed in a dark room, of feeling forgotten. Now this. He tried to find the words, but they wouldn't come. Walter stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the same street Daniel had once walked with his frail mother, the woman who never let him fall. You didn't see it, Walter said, almost to himself. But there were days I sat on my porch and cried watching you, because I'd never seen a son love like that. He turned back. And I wanted my daughter to marry a man like that. Daniel chuckled softly. Too bad I missed my chance. Walter smirked. Maybe not. She's single. Teaches 3rd grade at St. Cecilia's. Kind as her mother. Tough as me. Daniel raised an eyebrow. You're not serious. Walter's grin widened. I'll let her decide that. 2 weeks later, Daniel stepped into his new office as branch manager of Rivertown Financial. The staff was respectful, even curious. Most of them had expected a flashy suit from Chicago, not a man who walked in holding a photo of his late mother to place on his desk. He bought new furniture for the duplex, repainted the walls, replaced the roof Evelyn always said leaked during spring. The house became a home again. Not long after, Grace Davis came by with a casserole. Dad said you don't cook, she teased. I'm here to verify. Daniel smiled. I'm guilty. She stayed for tea, then dinner, then every Sunday. It took less than a year for love to blossom again. In 2018, they married in a small ceremony in the backyard of the duplex, the same backyard where Daniel used to wheel his mother out on sunny afternoons. He wore his father's cufflinks. Grace wore a lavender dress and held a bouquet of white lilies, Evelyn's favorite. Ella and Jaden attended. They were older now, 13 and 15, and Amanda stood at the back, watching quietly. She nodded at Daniel when their eyes met. No bitterness, just peace. Over time, the children visited more. Then they stayed for entire summers. Eventually, they chose to move in permanently. Amanda had remarried, and the kids felt a bond growing with their father again, and with Grace, who treated them like her own. Daniel became a father again, a husband again. But more than anything, he became a man restored, not by luck, not by force, but by grace, by faith, and by the quiet eyes of a neighbor who saw everything. By 2020, Daniel's home no longer resembled the hollow shell he had once drifted through. The creaky floorboards had been replaced, the roof sealed tight, and the living room now echoed with laughter again. The kind of laughter that bounced off walls and reached the soul. Family dinners returned to the table. Jaden talked endlessly about his school robotics team. Ella was applying to colleges. Grace decorated the house with hand-painted scripture verses, tiny pieces of her mother's legacy stitched into the corners of their lives. Daniel felt whole again, but not in the way he once was. This wholeness wasn't built on shiny cars or a handsome salary. Though he had both now, it was built from something deeper, something earned, something that cost everything. He still visited Evelyn's grave every Sunday before church. A simple stone, modest, like her. He would bring fresh roses, always white, and sit beside her for a few minutes in silence. "Guess what, Mom?" he'd whisper. "Ella got into Purdue. Full ride. Your granddaughter's a genius." Or, "Jaden scored the winning goal yesterday. You should have seen his face." And sometimes just, "Thank you." for never letting me become less than I should be. One Sunday in late fall, after service, Daniel stood in the back of the church as the congregation mingled. Walter, retired now, walked up beside him. "She'd be proud of you, you know," Walter said. Daniel nodded. "I hope so." Walter patted his shoulder. "You changed my life too." Daniel turned. "Me?" Walter chuckled. "Seeing how you loved your mother, it made me go back to mine. She's in her 90s now. I used to only call her twice a month. Now, every week. Visit her too." Daniel smiled, humbled. That night after dinner, Grace sat beside him on the porch swing, their fingers interlaced, the breeze cool against their faces. "You ever think about what would have happened if that flyer hadn't shown up in the mail?" she asked. He looked at her. "I'd probably still be in that house, wrapped in silence." She nodded slowly. "You think it was just luck?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He stared up at the stars, the same ones he used to look at from the hospital parking lot, in despair. "I don't believe in luck anymore," he said softly. "Not after everything." "Then what do you believe in?" she asked. He turned to her. "In watching eyes, in second chances, in people who do the right thing, even when it costs them everything. And maybe," he paused, eyes wet, "maybe in a God who doesn't let that go unnoticed." They sat in quiet after that. The kind of quiet that held peace, not pain. The kind of quiet that meant healing had happened, that the season had changed. Daniel began writing again, in his free time. Nothing professional, just thoughts. Letters to his kids. Letters he never sent to Amanda. Pages and pages to Evelyn. He taught a Sunday class on compassion and finance, how to balance love and responsibility, and how not to lose your soul chasing success. People listened, not because he had a perfect past, but because he had walked through fire and came out carrying the ones he loved. By 2024, Daniel's life had taken on a rhythm, not the polished, pristine beat of his younger days, but the deep, grounded hum of a man who had been broken and rebuilt with better hands. Rivertown Financial thrived under his leadership. Clients appreciated his calm demeanor, his ability to explain complex things with warmth, and his uncanny memory for people's stories. One elderly woman, Mrs. Henderson, once whispered to her daughter as they exited the branch, "That man's been through something. I can feel it." And he had. But he never wore it like a badge. Daniel didn't talk much about the past, unless someone needed to hear it, like the young teller Marcus, who was about to quit after his father fell ill. Daniel asked him to lunch, told him the truth, and gave him time off, paid, with no strings attached. "I'll cover for you," Daniel said. "Go take care of him." Marcus cried. It was Daniel's way of passing on what had been given to him, a chance. Not because someone owed it to him, but because someone believed in him when he no longer believed in himself. Grace and the kids built their own traditions. Friday game nights, Sunday hikes, family cookouts on holidays. They added another daughter to the mix in 2022, Emmy, full of curls and questions. Daniel held her in the hospital, cried softly, and whispered, "You'll know, your grandmother. I'll make sure of it." By 2025, Ella was a sophomore at Purdue studying biomedical engineering. Jaden had started community college, unsure of his path, but always asking his dad's advice. Grace had opened a small tutoring center in town, and Emmy was 4, full of energy and already asking when she could go to Daddy's bank and work. Daniel had even reconnected with Amanda, gradually. She'd remarried, but their conversations about the kids were no longer cold or guarded. One afternoon, while passing Ella's backpack between cars, she simply said, "You did the right thing, Daniel. I didn't see it then, but I do now." He nodded. "Thank you." That night he stood in Evelyn's room, now turned into a study, and lit a candle beside her photo. The house no longer smelled of antiseptic and grief, but of cinnamon and love. Grace had added lace curtains. Emmy had taped drawings on the walls. Still, Evelyn's chair sat in the corner. Daniel often read there when no one was around, and sometimes he swore he could feel her hand on his shoulder. In the final lines of a letter he wrote but never mailed, Daniel penned, "You gave me life once, and when you needed me most, I gave it back to you. I lost everything because of that, and in the end, I gained far more than I ever had." Not everyone saw what happened, but someone did, and he changed my world with 3 simple words: "You're hired." And to this day, I live to pass that mercy on, to give someone else a soft place to land, like you gave me. The letter sat folded in his desk drawer. Beside it, Evelyn's Bible, and every time Daniel reached for a pen, or answered a call from someone in need, or held his child a little longer before bed, he felt her presence, still watching, still proud, because some sacrifices are never forgotten.